Amario Cozier-Duberry's future has been unknown for a while now. We all know his current Arsenal contract runs out in a month and a half, and it's not known whether he will stay at Arsenal or switch clubs this summer. Fabrizio Romano recently reported that all hope is not over for Arsenal yet, as negotiations are still ongoing between the pair, but there is of course doubt as he hasn't signed one yet, as his contract runs out this summer. So let me know in the comments if you think Amario Cozier-Duberry will stay at Arsenal or if he will switch clubs this summer. But before we get started, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to my channel to never miss an upload. Amario Cozier-Duberry has this season scored 13 goals and got 5 assists in 23 appearances according to Transfermarkt. Tournaments he's played in this season is the Premier League 2, the UEFA Youth League and the EFL Trophy, where he just made 1 appearance. Cozier-Duberry has had a few injuries this season, where he's missed some games here and there, but he has not had a big one. Cozier-Duberry also got nominated for the Premier League 2 Player of the Month in April after a month filled with great performances. So overall he's had a good season this season, but he's not had an outstanding one like we'd seen, for example, Oscar Bob had last season with Man City, for example, but Cozier-Duberry has of course had a good season. It's a common thing in the Arsenal fanbase to say that Amario Cozier-Duberry is the next Bukayo Saka or is a Saka clone. And if you watched some clips of Cozier-Duberry, you know exactly why. The way he moves with and without the ball is extremely similar to the way Saka does it, and he also has the same finishing technique. Even some of the goals he scored this season is the same type of goals Saka scores. It is actually crazy how similar they look at times, and both of them of course play right wing position as well, which makes it even more scarier. It honestly looks like Saka has decided to play some U21 games for Arsenal this season. But why hasn't Amario Cozier-Duberry signed a new Arsenal contract? Well, normally when it comes to young and upcoming talents in these scenarios, there are a few things that always sticks out. And those things are the pathway to the first team, how many minutes or chances they got in the first team, and the money they will earn. So do Cozier-Duberry have a clear pathway to the first team? Right now I would say yes. The reason for that is that Reece Nelson will most likely leave the club in the summer, with Nketiah also definitely leaving, which opens up 2 attacking spots in the first team. Jesus and Smith Rowe's futures are also in doubt, so more spots could be open. So for me, a pathway to the first team is definitely there, but we can't forget that Cozier-Duberry isn't the only youth player who has his eyes on joining the first team next season, with both Vaneri and Lewis Kelly both being ahead of him, despite all of course playing in different positions. But with a busy summer coming ahead, I wouldn't be surprised if we have a thinner squad next season filled with more overall quality and more academy players. That's at least what I hope we will do next season. Total playtime can also be a reason for why he hasn't signed a contract yet. I will also come back later with why he potentially hasn't got any first team minutes this season, but it's always difficult to give youth players game time in the first team, especially when you have a quality team like we have now, and that is first of all because it's more difficult to make the team based on level and skill. The second reason is that there are squad players who also deserves minute and a chance to show what they got, and these squad players are of course in the first team. And when I'm talking about squad players, I'm talking like Reece Nelson, Smith Rowe, Fabio Vieira, who's always on the bench but are struggling to get regular minutes. As most of, if not every young player has an agent these days who most likely want their client to go where the most money is. And if that's a weekly wage or a massive sign-on bonus can be different from agent to agent, but we've seen plenty of examples where agents almost ruin players' careers. And we have got one example, not where an agent ruined a player's career, but where he switched clubs because of money, and that is of course when Omari Hutchinson left Arsenal a few years ago to join Chelsea. The reports then was that Chelsea offered much more money to Hutchinson than what Arsenal were willing to do, and I feel like the same thing could happen with Cozier-Duberry, as multiple big clubs are interested in the player. And Arsenal have shown with Ethan Vaneri and Miles Lewis-Kelly that they are willing to give big money to youth players, so I'm sure we will do the same, or are doing the same with Cozier-Duberry if we think he has a future at the club. So what can be the reasons as to why Amario Cozier-Duberry hasn't got any senior minutes for Arsenal? First and boring thing is that it's very easy for fans to overhype youth players. I'm not necessarily saying Arsenal fans have done so with Amario, but it's very easy to do so, as we mostly see the U21 and U18 highlights and not necessarily the full games. We only get to see the best bits of the players. Second and more correct reason in my opinion is that he hasn't committed his future to the club. I don't think Arsenal want to give Cozier-Duberry any chances over other youth players who have committed their future to Arsenal. Because why should a club give a player who will leave in a few months a chance with the first team? Is that a risk to take from a club? Yes, absolutely. It can make it easier for players to leave, but in my opinion, that's what academy football is. So many young and upcoming talents leave their clubs to join another team. Just look at all the good talent Chelsea and Manchester City have lost through the years. So I do think he would have featured more in matchday squads if he had already signed a new contract. For me, it feels like Arsenal really do believe in him, as he's constantly training with the first team, and Cozier-Duberry has also made a couple of matchday squads this season. With youth players, it's impossible to say if they are ready for first team football or not 99% of the time. That is because the difference between youth football and senior football is massive. There are many examples of players everyone was sure would make it for different reasons didn't have senior football, but if I were to guess, I'd like to think Cozier-Duberry is ready for first team football and could have played some minutes this season, especially in early cup rounds. Like I said, it's impossible to say, and there is also a reason why Charles Sagoe Jr. got minutes ahead of Cozier-Duberry. I'm not saying the reason for that is that Sagoe Jr. was more ready for senior football or not. It could also be contract talks, or if it was about match fitness due to injury as well. But what could Arsenal have done differently? Well, I think maybe we should have loaned him out earlier, although again that has its negative parts, as he wouldn't play the football we play at the club and would develop in a different system. And we could also end up with a situation where he just sits on the bench with a championship club like Patino has done in 2024, where he barely has played any minutes, or like Charles Sagoe Jr. who hasn't even made a matchday squads at Swansea. My guess is that if Amario had already signed a new contract with Arsenal, then he would have been sent out on loan in January, and if he signs one, I would say it's a 50% chance if he goes out on loan or not. What we know so far is that Amario Cozier-Duberry is yet to agree his future with any club. Arsenal are still hoping he will commit his future to North London, but many clubs are keeping an eye on the 18-year-old winger. It has been reported that there are many clubs in Europe who want to sign him, but the leading candidates that are not Arsenal are Newcastle and Borussia Dortmund. Top clubs in leagues outside the top 5 leagues have also previously shown interest in Cozier-Duberry, like Ajax and Anderlecht. But the team I'm most scared about signing Cozier-Duberry is Newcastle. They showed last summer that they can sign top prospects from the biggest clubs in the world when they signed then 17-year-old Alfie Harrison from Manchester City. If Cozier-Duberry decides to stay at Arsenal, which I absolutely hope, then I can, like I said, see him leave on loan to a championship side in the summer, although that is very difficult to predict, as we don't really know how he performs in senior football. Is it a step too high? Is it a step too low? We never know with these youth players. Or he can take the role Reece Nelson has had this season, and that is of course if he has that level in him, which I do believe he potentially has. And I wouldn't even be too surprised if he could take further steps either in the very near future. And when I was talking about the Reece Nelson role, I was referring to be one of the last names in the matchday squads, but getting an odd start here and there if there are some injury issues, and then getting some minutes off the bench where the games are already won or we are desperately looking for a winner. That is a role I could potentially see Cozier-Duberry play next season if he decides to stay in North London. While I do think he will be done with playing youth football for the majority of the time after this season, it may still also be the case that we'll have one more season in the Premier League 2 to really showcase what he's got and get real into the Arsenal system, and then join the first team in 2025-2026 season. Although who knows, as his future is still in doubt, there is a big chance he unfortunately leaves Arsenal this summer. It's of course impossible to predict what kind of role a player who's played 0 first team minutes can get, especially when it's a huge chance he will leave Arsenal as well, but I do think he could get some decent minutes next season if he decides to stay, but that is of course a big if. That was what I had to say for today. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll talk to you guys next time.